Dr. Jessica Ashe here. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Tom Heuer and Steve Coates about how to ignite your extraordinary. So stay tuned. Thanks for joining us today. As I said, I'm very happy to be joined today by Tom Heuer and Steve Coates, who co-wrote a book, Ignite the Extraordinary. Tom and Steve, welcome. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Jesse.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
So can you tell me a little bit about your backgrounds and how that pertains to your book?
So briefly, I've spent 40 years in the corporate world and now 10 years teaching at Miami University. And part of my corporate experience was leading a company, but also a lot of consulting work at Deloitte. And then ultimately understanding that leadership was my journey in life that I needed to take and I wanted to take. And as I looked at leadership is the art of convincing others to want to struggle for shared aspirations. Found out for me that my whole sense of purpose was to get up every day and create more leaders in the world. And that's what brought us to writing this book and getting this sense. So it's a pleasure sitting here and being able to talk to it. And it's been a pleasure working with Steve Coates for a number of years as my partner.
Wonderful. And Steve, can you tell us a little bit about your background as it pertains to the book?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that. Like Tom, I've had some corporate experience. Started with AT&T and was served as a national account manager with them for several years. And I'd always been a student of leadership like Tom and discovered at that particular point in time that there wasn't much to equip people with the jobs I had on how to lead. So I decided that for people in that position and others that I was going to get back to my calling and which was following this path about leadership development. And soon after that, I left and started with a group of people, which Tom joined us at some time later. And we had a little consulting firm that I've been with now for over 30 years, focusing on developing people and developing teams into becoming better leaders. And one of the things that we found was that the leaders are people that continue to grow. They're learning all the time, they're growing, they know that's what's required for them to become better leaders. And that was one of the things that led us into this theme about continuing to grow and sustaining growth, which is what the book's about.
That's fabulous. And Tom, thank you for reminding me about your definition of leadership. It's just wonderful. And so, but I'd like to hear from you guys. I'd like to start with your sustaining growth model. Can you tell us, what were you experiencing when that started your thinking around the sustaining growth model?
So a couple of items, Jessica, that were really, really important. Number one, Steve and I have always done a significant amount of executive coaching. And one of the things that we were seeing in a number of the coaching situations we were involved with is it was hard and difficult to move the person out of complacency. And one of the things that we saw was the reason why he or she found a need for a coach was they weren't growing, they weren't developing, and in many ways, they didn't understand the process of growth. And one of the things that we see in the model that we've created is that if you're going to move forward, and growth is about moving forward, you're going to have to become uncomfortable. And part of this model that we've created is how do we sustain growth by moving people out of the comfort level into a relatively understanding, embracing risks, and embracing being uncomfortable. The other part of this is that it's really, really difficult, Jessica, to move people out of complacency. And showing this model and working with this model, we have helped people to see what it takes to move through these 4 steps or these 4 phases to get to mastery. That's what we mean by sustaining growth. And we think that this model, with people being coached with this model, it's really helped them move forward. So Steve, why don't you talk to people a little bit about what complacency is all about?
Yeah, and as I do that, I just wanted to mention that part of this is, Tom mentioned that to grow you have to be uncomfortable, and we also, though, from our work in leadership, we wanted to keep people focused on not just everyday results or ordinary results, but what does it take to really achieve greatness or extraordinary type of results. So when we looked at those various combinations of being comfortable or uncomfortable and achieving ordinary results or extraordinary results, that's what led us to the model. And the first stage of that model, which we knew we needed to really write about, was this thing called complacency. And that's that part where people are very comfortable in their work and they're what we call producing pretty ordinary results. They're working hard enough where they're not going to get fired. They're doing enough, making enough where they don't want to quit. And so in the book, we describe some of the really basic reasons that complacency sets in. And, complacency is not this, you're just tired or fatigued and you need a break for a couple of weeks. It's this mindset that we've talked about before where, hey, ordinary's good enough. I'd rather come in and work in a comfortable environment with comfortable people and, do okay, but I don't want to take any kind of risks to set the world on fire. And as Tom mentioned, we just see a lot of complacency setting in organizations because it's so doggone hard to move into that realm of the uncomfortable.
Well, what I see today with COVID is that we have all been put into a position of being uncomfortable, and so it's kind of hard to be complacent in a situation like this, isn't it?
You'd think, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Yes.
But by the same token, we've got great examples through COVID of organizations and individuals really trying some new and different things. And that's been so enjoyable for Tom and I to watch. And yet at the same time, we'll still come across organizations that you'll hear people, well, it won't be long and we'll be getting back to the way we used to do things when we were doing them right. And they're just seeking that comfort of, the old ways of doing things, or what used to be normal. And we have news for people. When the doors reopen again, normal is going to look a whole lot different than it did before. So in spite of some of the great things that have happened, we've still come across a number of people who are waiting to get back to the way it's always been.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It's funny because people will say, I can't wait for it to get back to normal. And I'll say, don't you realize that we're never going back? We don't go back, we go forward. And there will be a new normal. And they just say, no.
Well, and the idea also, Jessica, is that if a company is going to survive during COVID, they certainly have to have changed. They certainly have had to make have understood the risks and made some significant changes as far as their products are concerned or how they serve customers or whatever. If they didn't make any changes, pretty much they may not be around as an organization today. It's the same way with people. So this idea of moving to the next phase with igniting, kind of igniting possibilities. Think about this. Steve and I often ask organizations, what's the difference between management and leadership? And one of the basic differences is that leaders tend to understand and embrace the idea of thinking about possibilities versus probabilities. Managers think in probabilities, leaders think in possibilities. And that's what moves people out of complacency, is to ignite the ideas around what are the possibilities, stepping back and thinking about, for my life, for my legacy, for my future, what are the possibilities out there? Now, two things that we talk about in the book, that's really, really difficult for an individual sometimes to do by himself and herself. So there's two ways of looking at this. Number one is we've got to spend time in this particular phase of thinking about what's our purpose? Why are we here? What's our mission? And that's really, really, quite frankly, difficult for people to do. We talk about in the book and have a couple of assignments that really help them to do that. The other thing that we really understand that helps people move out of complacency is to find a mentor, is to find somebody who will support them and work with them and advise them and actually give them a boot and a kick to get out of complacency. And it's really, really difficult once you're there. But if you have a mentor and you're willing to spend time thinking about your sense of purpose and mission, then igniting the possibilities happens, and we start understanding what uncomfortable becomes like.
Yeah. And Jesse, one of the things I'd add to that is, it's so inspiring to talk about possibilities.
Yeah.
But then reality sets in and people will say, but my goals that I get paid for are based on what I can deliver, not just some far-fetched possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's that tension about, should I really pursue something that could happen, or do I get kind of drawn back into complacency of, hey, just do your job the way that you're supposed to do it. When there's a need for new possibilities, we'll tell you about them, and then you can work on them. And so there's some managerial type of systems that kind of force people back into complacency, as opposed to helping them soar and really pursue those possibilities that can turn their businesses around and their own lives around.
Yeah, it's just amazing. I guess I just don't live in a comfort zone. I'm always trying something new. And so it's hard for me to even comprehend complacency. But I guess that's how most of the world lives.
But Jesse, you're one of the, you're kind of one of the few that are really leaders. The difficulty of moving from being a manager to a leader is often just really, really, it's that journey. And we, go through that journey and get a lot of potholes. And when we hit a pothole, what happens to the manager? They just kind of stop and say, it's all over. I'm going to go back in my office and close the door. Versus a leader looks at it just as an opportunity again to move forward and find that next pothole.
Yeah, that's right. It's great for people that love that arena, but we've just found numbers tend to be more comfortable with spreadsheets.
Yeah, that's right.
When they do the unknown, and unfortunately,
I have a joke there's a joke in my office that you go to these meetings and they're like spreadsheet parties. Oh, let me share my spreadsheet with you. And they get so excited and they share their spreadsheets. And I'm like, but why? Why are we having a spreadsheet party? And they look at me like, it's a spreadsheet. I'm like,
yeah. Tom and I have said on a couple of occasions that we've come across folks that seem to spend more time trying to find different ways to count the money that's already in the bank, as opposed to figuring out ways to put more money into the bank.
Yeah.
It's back to that comfort zone.
And see, that's why, I've been fortunate in my last 10 years to teach in the entrepreneurship program at Miami, and to watch students, Jesse, move out of complacency and understand that by moving out of complacency, they need to take risks. And quite frankly, one way they take a risk is that they walk to the farmers, they walk to camp, they walk to the building, they have classes indifferently and take a different route during the day. And the reason why they took a different route is they wanted to see different people. They wanted to see if the road was full of a few more potholes, or if what the experience was differently. And that's taking a risk, is moving into this idea that we call breakthrough,
Okay.
in the model. And breakthrough is about taking risks, but understanding that when we take a risk, we may fail, but from that failure, we're going to learn. And that's what's extraordinary. That's what creates extraordinary people. When they become uncomfortable and they take risks, they become extraordinary. They're out on the frontier. They're out going through that thrilling journey to the growth frontier that we talk about in the book, without moving forward out of igniting possibilities and then realizing how important that risk taking is, how important failing is, and how important learning and growing from the failure is. We don't get to that point of extraordinary. In fact, real quickly, for 30 seconds, the idea that we state in the book is that an individual, a great, really, really good baseball player, decides, hey, listen, I want to become a switch hitter. And they try hard. They that idea of becoming a switch hitter ignites possibilities inside of them. But then they get up there and start batting left-handed, and they strike out and they strike out and they strike out. Finally, 8 games later, they foul off the ball, and they realize, now I've got a breakthrough because I could hit that ball. I've taken that risk. I've failed, but I know I could make it happen. And now they become extraordinary with a lot more work at it. That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, and Jesse, in that stage of achieving breakthroughs, there's still a lot of discomfort that people are experiencing. And I think about whether it's Pfizer or Moderna or the J&J people, they've been going through that. What's the possibilities of a vaccine? We're trying some things. We're hitting some small breakthroughs. Now they've been released on an emergency basis. And I imagine a lot of those folks are still kind of waking up in the middle of the night wondering, is it going to work? We've done all the testing and so forth, but we're not going to know for a while. So there's that level of uncomfort, although they have already made some extraordinary breakthroughs. And it's just part of the process.
I remember the first seminar I ever did. And it was interesting because, first of all, the individual who was supposed to be my co-person there, this was a seminar with Ohio Bell years ago, actually showed up 5 hours late. And so I had to start this particular program for 3 days by myself, and I had no idea how to start this program. So we just worked through it and understood it. And I got some great feedback of how I did and the things that I need to improve. But I would tell you that excited me so much to move forward. And that gave me the idea that I can do this,
Yeah, that must have been really scary. You're certainly out of your comfort zone.
Totally.
And Jesse, as we move into the final stage there on mastery, you could probably think back at your own experience from your very first time on the air with a podcast to where you are now with it. And if
there you go,
my power went out and my face disappeared, you'd sit there and it would be just a natural thing for you to cover with it, where your first time through, it would have been a little bit more difficult, perhaps.
Yeah, that's true. Yesterday, I was doing an interview, and the person who was interviewing me, their internet went out. And so I was alone in Pakistan. But I just laughed. And then when he came back in, he was upside down. And I was just like, well, we're always just struggling with technology. And, one of the things that I have been saying, I say to all my students, and I started, it's worth mentioning here that Tom and I first started working together during an MBA class of mine that he was teaching on leadership. And it was when we first went online. And I thought it was funny that you asked me to help you teach the class that I was taking, but also because like I was not an expert in computer learning via the computer at the time. And but that teamwork really helped both of us to find comfort in this. And the thing I'm always saying to my students, sometimes they'll apologize. They'll say, "Oh, I'm sorry, my internet kicked me out." And I'll say, "You came back. You don't control the internet gods, you
Yeah.
know, and so don't waste time being upset with whatever the internet does. You don't control it, but you do control your attitude, and you're here.
Yeah.
So kudos to you. You showed up for your future."
Exactly. Well, when people get more experience with that, they actually go through that fourth stage that we talk about, which is the category called mastering excellence. And believe it or not, we oftentimes wondered, can somebody actually be really, truly comfortable and still be producing extraordinary results? And when we began to research that, we did find a number of people. It's easy to see athletes that they just seem to be in the zone all the time, and their heartbeats hardly go up at all. One of the features in the book is the freestyle climber named Alex Honnold. And Alex, he climbs these sheer cliffs like El Capitan and so forth with no safety lines. And when he does these, he's got teams out there with him and they're measuring his heartbeat and so forth. And he might be up 2 beats per second. He's just as calm as can be. But he's totally prepared. The preparation he's gone through, for him, I know how to do this. I know every move. I know where to put my hand on every moment on that wall. So you can get to that point where you really, truly excel over time and be quite comfortable. There was a book written many years ago called Flow. And the author's name is very, very, very difficult to pronounce. It's something like Csikszentmihalyi. But if you Google Flow, Flow, you'll see all of that. But he wrote about people that were literally in that flow state or in the zone. And it was surgeons, for example, that they were involved in one of the most complex, operations they've ever been involved with. They're just as calm, as cool as can be, making great progress, doing the very best work of their lives. They might be in there for 8 or 10 hours, and time just seemed to fly by. And so we knew that there was a category for people that if they kept working at it and kept growing, they could find that moment where you can be an extraordinary leader of a podcast, comfortable as can be. When problems happen, you've got the confidence and the capabilities to deal with it.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's what mastery is all about.
And just one additional point that Steve and I really love to make around this particular model under mastery is that, we encourage people to celebrate once they get to mastery, to really understand how important it is. But we also then really encourage them and move them to go right back through the cycle. Because if they stay at mastery too long, complacency will start in again. And it's that opportunity now to ignite themselves, to see future possibilities. What's next? How do I move forward and make a difference going forward again? And so staying and hitting mastery, we want them to celebrate. We want them to celebrate. Man, it's been a while since we've been here. It's been a journey, but we've got to get to the point of, after the encouragement and celebrate, is then to now start thinking about what is that next opportunity? What is that next big thing? What is that next big risk taking that I move forward with to go through, make a difference, and reach mastery again?
And that explains, as we talk about some of those folks in the book, that Tom has no doubt dealt with tenured professors that have kind of lost the fire in their belly. We've both come across senior people.
That's right.
Who have seemed to spend more time watching the stock ticker on a TV so they can calculate their wealth, as opposed to spending much time growing the business, because they're tired, they're burnt out, they just don't have that fire in their belly anymore, whatever it turns out to be, and they have become complacent.
I told a class the other day, I've done 162 coaching assignments over the years, and I would say 75% of them are assignments that Steve just talked about. The kind of the fire in their belly has gone away. They achieved mastery and didn't realize, hey, that they couldn't step back and just rely, kind of rest the rest of their career. That's not the expectation. It was now, how do we get them motivated again to move right back through the cycle and achieve something significant for themselves, for the people around there, and for their organization.
Yeah, I wanted to show that again. And I think that's an important point, Tom, that you're talking about CEOs and CIOs, that even though they've achieved mastery at something, they should get back into that cycle again so they don't get complacent.
That's right.
Yeah, and there's behind the model in the book, Tom and I took a look at the different phases that people go through in their careers. And one of those phases is a phase we call giving back. And a lot of the coaching that we've been involved with, I can see where a CEO, for example, is just as an example, is tired. Growing the business is hard work and so forth. And, I've made my legacy. I don't know if I want to continue to do this, for 20 more years or whatnot till I'm 80 years old. But when we look at, well, if you don't want to do that, then how can you still find even great purpose and mastery in purpose by doing something like giving back? Perhaps you can build the capabilities in the organization differently. You can be that mentor that people really need. You can be a coach for young people coming into your organization. You don't have to be that CEO that's got to meet with Wall Street all the time and be worried about the numbers. There's a lot of ways you can go back through the growth cycle, through igniting possibilities in others and in yourself, breakthrough and mastery, and still serve in a great way besides just the role you've had throughout your career.
Giving back is so important to me. And I know that a lot of motivational speakers talk about how important it is to give back. And it's hard for some people to understand in other countries. But the United States is very focused on giving back. In fact, we're always in the top 2 of nations who donate time and money to causes, and that we instill that in youth. So my son, all youth are required to perform a certain number of community service hours. And I think what that does, Steve, is it creates a population of people who are focused on, well, what does my community need?
Right.
And it's that simple. What does my community need? And we're all focused on that. To give you an example, there was a tragedy at my husband's, not at the business, but one of my husband's employees, their house burned down on Monday.
Oh my.
Wow.
It's a big tragedy, but we posted on a GoFundMe page, and so far we've raised dollars, $14,000. And that's a community that's focused on self-reliance and helping the people in the community.
Yeah.
And that's
Tom,
why
I was going to quickly say that, it's not just about giving money. A lot of times people say, well, I don't have the financial capabilities to give back.
Yeah.
My office manager, whose name is Connie, she was, reading the sections in the book and so forth about this. And she wrote me back in just a little comment. She said, her dad, who's still with us, and gosh, he's mid-90s right now. But she said, when he was volunteering at the hospital, and he's like 92 years old when he's volunteering at a hospital, just whatever they needed him to do. She said,
Amazing.
I didn't realize how how much that meant to him to be able to go and just do those little things. He said when he left the hospital, she said, I could tell a difference in him.
I remember two things, 2 points. And the whole giving back, giving back can start when you're a teenager. Giving back can start very early in your career. It doesn't have to wait, because I remember my family, my brothers and sisters standing around a ping pong table when we were 16, 17, 18 years old, putting packages to gift packages together at Christmas time for children who were in children's home who had nothing taking place. And we would put all these together. And it was such the greatest feeling to do that, and with my family as well. But the second thing, Jesse, is that my whole life, and today, besides teaching, I get the joy of just coaching and working with students and helping them, giving back to them an understanding of how I've been successful over the careers and what it takes to be that, and being able to sit down with them and share that with them and help them see what it is. The opportunity is just a joy in life to be able to do that. And so when we look at, just very quickly, the career phases that we've talked about in the book, there's 4. And I'm not going to talk a lot about them. It's just the first career phase and life phase is let there be light. And people need to understand as early as possible, what's your purpose? What's your mission in life? What's your legacy going to be? And then secondly, if you really understand that, the second phase is learn to fly. Once you understand your purpose and mission, then you can build the skill sets, the expertise, and the experience around your purpose and mission. And it will excite you from day one to be able to do that. However, please do not move out of learn to fly too fast, because in today's world, building that skill set is so vitally important for you to move into phase 3, which is reaping the rewards. If you've really built a skill set after that, learn to fly, you can step out and look at any opportunity and say, yeah, I want to do that. I want to do this. It lines me up with my purpose and I can do it. And you'll reap the rewards from doing that. And the final stage we've already talked about is giving back. Okay. And it's such a wonderful time of life to be able to focus on giving back to people around you.
Yeah, so I just changed the banner to those 4 phases of careers, and I hope that helps people. And before we go, we are kind of running out of time, but I did want to. So, one of my questions here is, how does the sustaining growth model interact with these 4 life career phases?
Yeah, when we look at that, we would oftentimes hear questions like, gosh, can somebody really achieve mastery if they're just right out of school, going into the workplace? And Tom and I were having a meeting with the president of one of the divisions of Cincinnati Bell several years ago. And because we live in the Cincinnati area, and we remember talking to this guy, and he said, well, one of his biggest problems was his top code writer could only work with him like 15 hours a week, because he's still a junior in high school, and you just can't work kids that young for 40 or 50 hours. And it dawned on us, yeah, some people can really hit some extraordinary levels of performance younger in their lives. So, when we considered that, we sit there and say, all right, whatever phase you're in, if you're learning to fly, for example, which is at building your skill base, you've got to be dealing with possibilities. If you've got a leader or a mentor somewhere in there to really excite you about these possibilities, talk with you about them, guide you through, if you will, to where you're finding some breakthroughs, you might still be learning your craft, but you're going to experience all of those phases of the sustaining growth model.
Can you do them all 4 all the time? Like, I don't feel like I'm not learning to fly. Like, every day I'm learning something new about podcasting, and I'm certainly giving back. Mindset News is all about inspiring youth around the world to continue their education. I'm not perfect at it.
I'll tell you, Tom and I are convinced the great performers over time never leave career phase number 2 of learning to fly.
Yeah.
They keep learning and keep learning and keep learning. And that enables them to exploit more and more and more and more and more, which is the third phase of reaping the rewards.
The one caution, Jessica,
Yeah.
is this. We have so many people in complacency today that they don't want to take the time and the effort to really find their light, to really find their sense of purpose. That is hard work. It takes a lot of effort, and they think it ought to be done instantly. It can't. And if we don't spend time understanding our sense of purpose and mission, life will not be what it is that will not achieve the extraordinary. And so it takes effort. It's hard. It's difficult, but we want, in most cases, a lot of people want instant gratification, and that just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And
So go ahead, Steve.
I was just going to say with complacency.
Yeah.
With complacency, people say, well, why is that part of the cycle of growth? Well, it inevitably happens. It is so easy for people to get pulled back into that. We wanted to call it out so people would be more aware when they landed there, because it's a very seductive force that's trying to pull you back into your comfort zone.
That's right.
And into less than stellar results.
That's right.
So I wanted to give each of you a moment to try to wrap up because we're coming to the end of the time here today.
Mm-hmm.
So Tom, do you want to give us your final words first?
I think, first of all, thanks, Jessica, for allowing us to come on your podcast. We appreciate it very, very much. My concern today, I don't worry about anything. So I tell people don't use that word. But my concern is that we need to be helping young people to move out of complacency. It's hard for them to do it by themselves. We've got to give them the tools, help them to understand that complacency is about laziness, and the move out of complacency will open up tremendous opportunities for them if they're willing to take risks, if they're willing to become uncomfortable. But we, faculty,
mentors,
faculty, parents, guidance counselors, it's our job today to help them, to support them, to work through them so that they can experience life and experience a sense of purpose and mission.
Especially in light of the current situation, you have never needed guidance more.
That's right.
And I was so disappointed with so many professors who were saying things like, it's not in my contract to teach online and I'm not doing it. Like, and you're educational leaders, really?
I would get, Jesse, I'd get students that say, Professor Heuer, I'm so thankful for you and the entrepreneurship department. You're the only group of faculty that's there live with me.
Good. All right. And so some concluding statements from Steve Coates.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks again for hosting us today. It's been a blast. And to build on the idea of complacency, Tom and I believe that, it's complacent managers that produce complacent people. And it's those folks around it that they'll allow us to be complacent. So I just hope that even if you don't have that mentor or that coach or that great leader that you're working for, that people will just choose among themselves to become more curious, to want to explore what other avenues are for them or in life, because it's this idea of the exploration, the curiosity, the igniting of possibilities that just really adds that fulfillment to people's lives. And get used to failing. You hear all that a lot, but not every failure has to be public. It doesn't have to derail your whole life. So have some fun with it. But boy, I just encourage people to explore, strive to continue to grow throughout your life. That's the message I'd like them to leave. to take.
All right. Well, I think those are good statements to end on. And I want to thank you both for being here today. And I hope you'll come back soon.
Thanks, Jesse.
Love to. Thank you, Jesse.
Cool.
Great. Thanks. Bye-bye. I'm Jessica Ashe, and today we have been discussing the book, Ignite the Extraordinary, with Tom Heuer and Steve Coates. So thank you for being with us here today, and we'll see you soon.